Previously on Dual Spirit Adventures, you saw a disappointed version of me, you saw a worried version of me, a frustrated version of me, thinking version of me, some adorable kitties, had a little toe incident, spent an awful lot of time in the Ecuadorian consulate, finally managed to obtain the Ecuadorian visa, paying a fortune of visa fees, and was making my way into the equatorial country, Ecuador. So, Ecuador. It took me a week to get the visa, and it took 3 hours at the border. Nevertheless, I was finally in Ecuador. Infrastructure here, at least the roads, were in very good condition. Maybe the tourist visa fees were going into paving the roads. Who knows? Some of the visa fees might also be going to these police barricades. There was literally one barricade every single mile. Anyway, I settled down in a quiet hotel room for the night. The owner of the hotel noticed my limp and asked me what had happened. On narrating how I got T-boned by another motorcycle in Colombia, the owner's daughter Emma, who was a nurse, insisted that I needed to get my wound cleaned out. Warning, this could be graphic for some viewers, hence I have an overlay of some kittens playing. Emma undid my first aid, which I did a terrible job at. Using her nursing tools and solutions to disinfect my wound, cleaned off dirt and bacteria, and redressed my wound the way it should be done. Probably saved me from more trouble in the future. Thanks again, Emma and Emma's dad. I returned the favor with some aerial photography of their hotel. It was a regular day at school for the local kids, but for me, however, I was approaching a milestone. The milestone of reaching the equator. Coming from the Arctic Circle, I would have been bummed if I couldn't get to physically cross the equator. I know the equator is an imaginary line, but I had certainly not imagined that I would cross it physically on my motorcycle. If you were to ask me if that $500 visa fee was worth it, it was, for just this moment. Having ridden about 14,000 miles from the Arctic Circle, I was here. I was here at the equator, a moment to cherish and celebrate indeed. As you can see here, I'm limping and struggling to establish a connection. I gave up and I flipped the drone. As you can see, I'm standing on the equator with left leg on the southern hemisphere, right leg on the northern hemisphere. It's been quite a journey. Coming from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, it was 71 degrees in Prudhoe Bay. And here in the equator, I don't know if you can see, it's about 0 degrees. It's exactly 0 degrees actually. So quite an experience, quite an adventure so far. It wasn't difficult getting into equator, as you all know, but It is pretty cool to be here.
So I give you a little explanation about this place. Our platform where we are is a big.
He basically went on to explain the sun traversing over the equator on the days of equinox, summer solstice, and winter solstice. It took me right back to my geography class from high school days.
4 and 5 p.m.
Okay.
But after March, for example, the equator is also running in Colombia and Brazil, Africa, Congo, Gabon, Uganda, Kenya, Sumatra, Borneo in Indonesia, even in Galapagos Islands, over the Isabella. That's why the most common question when the people came here is why we have the name Ecuador, why not another countries where the equator is running. So the main reason is because the Andes that we have for our geography, for the hills, because in this region in Ecuador, the Andes, these mountains provide all the fixed points on the horizon, the fixed landmarks, doesn't move, doesn't change, where we can track the movements of the sun, the moon, and measure it. This kind of measure is not able to do in another places, for example, Colombia or Brazil, because the equator is running on the Amazonia, inside the jungle. These are savannas, islands. It's flat. They don't have the reference point. That's why 200 years ago, the French geodesic mission came this region to use these reference points to do the mathematical triangulations and to prove the thesis by Isaac Newton, the shape of the Earth. The Earth is flat around the pole and bald on the equator. They need these reference points to measure the shape of the Earth. They never went to Gabon, or they never went to Brazil. They need these hills. That's why these people came this region. And then they give us the name Ecuador.
That, my friends, is why Ecuador is called Ecuador. Anyway, just south of the actual equatorial line was the fake equatorial tourist trap called Mitad del Mundo. It literally translates to middle of the world. This was obviously for all the tourist crowd from the capital city, Quito. Funny thing is that this isn't even the actual equatorial line, it's south of the actual line. Just paint a bright yellow line, stick a giant monument next to it, have fancy north-south signs, and that's enough to fool a lot of tourists. That being said, I joined along and hopped on the tourist bus. Then had a meal on the equator.
How do I eat this? A lot of vegetables.
In Quito, I stayed with Jose and his wife. Jose is a lawyer, spoke a bit of English, and he saw me at the Ecuadorian consulate in Colombia when I was struggling with the language while I was trying to get the tourist visa. He helped me with the translation, and when in Quito, they offered a place for me to stay and took me on a small tour around the city. I could have done a better job with the camera angle, in all honesty. Then I caught up with my friend from back home. I'm glad they did not forget my existence, and I'm glad she hasn't stopped being goofy. The following morning, the lawyer and his wife waved me goodbye, and I rode off out of the capital city, Quito. The roads were immaculate. It was hard to believe I was in a country in South America. It's all that tourist visa fees. On the other hand though, this lady prepared my meal in the restaurant I was dining and taught her kid mathematics during her free time. Life here is hard. Leaving this tough life behind, I visited this volcano crater, Quilotoa. The crater is high up in the Andes and is 3 kilometers wide. Further south from the crater is Mount Chimborazo. It is the closest piece of land on planet Earth to the Sun. Let me explain before you fact check me about Mount Everest. Yes, Mount Everest is still the tallest peak on Earth, standing at 29,000 feet, while Chimborazo tops only at 20,000 feet. But we are talking in terms of sea level here. However, the combined effects of gravity and rotational centrifugal force has given the Earth an equatorial bulge over the poles. This equatorial bulge puts the top of Mount Chimborazo 7,000 feet higher than the top of Mount Everest from the center of the Earth. Hence, technically, this is the highest point on planet Earth. This place was desolate with no life whatsoever. It was extremely windy and bitter cold. This blurry and shaky phone footage is all I could manage. I couldn't even prop my helmet visor open. I would have never believed if anyone were to tell me that there would be frigid temperatures and snow right around the equator. Anyway, leaving the tall Andes behind, I decided to quickly pop into the Amazonia jungle. And boy oh boy was it mesmerizing. I'd never seen a jungle this thick in my entire life. The forest canopy was swept clean by torrential downpour, as you can see here clearly. The only downside was that I was here during the monsoon, which meant every fiber in my body was wet. Ask any motorcyclist, riding for hours in rain will eventually soak up all your gear, however good it might be, and will make riding a miserable affair. A 700-meter long tunnel certainly helped temporarily, but at the end of it was just more rain. Ecuador, although a small country in terms of land area, the variety of scenery it had to offer took me by surprise. It has the high Andean region, dense Amazonian region, the Pacific coast, and the Galapagos Islands. I was lucky enough to visit 3 out of these 4 worlds, hence maximizing the use of my expensive tourist visa. I'm not going to lie, riding through these breathtakingly beautiful roads made it all worthwhile. Until a landslide blocks your path.
Ahí hay que sacar esa tierra de ahí.
Es que tiene un rectito, no se va a resbalar y se va a implementar aquí abajo. Rectito. Hijo, pero dale más allá. No. No, sí. Suavito, pero. No. Dale para atrás. Para el otro lado. No, gira. Dale. Gira a la derecha. Dale.
Lucky for me, my bike could squeeze right through it. But the locals in their Chevy vans weren't so lucky. All in all, Ecuador was an amazing week spent. I would probably never visit this country in my life again, but this one week was enough to leave a lasting impression. This is also where I would like to end episode 16. Thanks for the memories, Ecuador. It was now time to cross into the next country, Peru.